Well, good morning. I would like you to turn with me, please, to Psalm 77. All the sevens, 77, from 99 to 77. Why did I choose this psalm? Well, it's a psalm about prayer. And I increasingly believe that prayer is important. Around the world, there's been a groundswell of interest in prayer for years. And here in the UK, in more recent years, there's been a growing commitment to prayer. And here in our church, there is a greater interest in prayer. We seem to be exploring, working out how to do it, new ways of doing it, and it's great. And I believe that our future and our potential as a church to change Watford and to change the world depends on how our prayer life develops. And we all have lots and lots and lots to learn about prayer. So I've chosen this psalm about prayer. Now, one thing about this psalm is very interesting. There are no requests in this prayer. Not one ask about anything. Now, there's nothing wrong with making requests in prayer, asking God for things. In fact, we are instructed to do so, to ask for ourselves and for our community and for our world. But prayer is not all about asking. Prayer is a conversation, an interaction, a relationship-building exercise, a development-building exercise. Now, at the top of the psalm, you'll see that there are two men mentioned. Jeduthun was one of the chief musicians appointed by David to lead public worship. And we read about him in 1 Corinthians 16, if you're interested. He was a worship leader and maybe a percussionist, I don't know. Asaph was Jeduthun's senior leader. Asaph was very well known in the Psalms. He's mentioned everywhere. He was the overall director of music and obviously a great songwriter. And Asaph had written this song for Jeduthun to use. And it's a song about prayer. Let's read the first few verses. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night I stretched out untiring hands, and my soul refused to be comforted. I remembered you, O God, and I groaned. I mused, and my spirit grew faint. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart mused, and my spirit inquired. Now, there's an interesting word there that occurs twice in this psalm, and it describes a prayerful attitude. And you probably noticed, because I emphasised it, it's the word mused. It occurs in verse 3 and in verse 6, and it occurs nowhere else in the whole of this version of the NIV Bible. Mused is an interesting word. What does it mean? Well, the dictionary talks about pondering and meditating. And the translators of the Hebrew have used meditate and remembered and communed and thought. And one of them even talks about shaking your head. Now, I don't understand Hebrew. But those who translated the Hebrew do understand Hebrew, and they had their reasons for doing it. But I like this idea of musing. Musing is not sitting in silence and contemplating a navel. Musing is not having first interesting things you might think of. Musing is just not letting your mind wander. And musing is not about making judgment. It's not about complaining. I suppose ponder is one of the best words to describe it, but musing involves an aspect of awe and wonder, a sense of mystery. What on earth are you doing, God? Type reaction. One of the translators, as I said, talked about shaking of the head. That's a shaking of the head in disbelief, in amazement, in wonder, in mystery, in that sense of awe. And that's surely why there should be more silence in our times of prayer. We're left speechless. We're left without words. We don't understand, nor often should we. Too troubled to speak, it says in verse 4. We need to muse together on what God has said and what God is saying. Now, the overriding message of the psalm is that we must muse more in prayer, both individually and corporately. Now, let's have a look at the psalm in a little bit more detail. In these first 4 verses, they're about musing as we search in prayer. We've read these verses already, so I won't read them again. We are searching for God, God's will, God's plan, God's purposes, God's intention, God's reaction to a situation. We want God to speak. We want God to explain if he can. Now, we hear from God from the Bible. We hear directly from a picture or a vision or something like that. We hear also through the thoughts and reactions of other people. Sometimes God tells us his plans. Sometimes he doesn't. In fact, often he doesn't. But prayer is this two-way communication. We should listen as well as talk. And the first problem we have, I think, in prayer is that prayer has become too much of a shopping list. Look at the words used in this section. I cried out to God, verse 1. I sought the Lord, verse 2. I stretched out untiring hands, verse 2. I remembered, verse 3. I groaned, verse 3. I mused, verse 3. I was too troubled to speak, verse 4. Our times of prayer must be searching sessions. There'll be some asking as well, of course. We must listen and we must muse. And then when we go on to verses 5 to 9, it's about openness and honesty in prayer. You know, people say some funny things in prayer. I had at a missionary prayer meeting once, somebody said, "Oh Lord, I pray for all the people who live in the uninhabited parts of the world." Now, God didn't have much problem in answering that prayer, did he? And then at a baptismal service, there was a rather largish lady being baptized, and somebody prayed, "Oh Lord, I pray that our sister may not shrink from this experience." And some of the people said, I'm into that, and others didn't. But seriously, our prayers, particularly at a prayer meeting, lack openness and honesty. We don't tell God how we feel. Listen to these words. I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart mused and my spirit inquired, will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favour again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? In verses 7 to 9 there are 6 questions in just 3 verses. These are questions about how we feel. God, we feel you're letting us down. God, you don't ever seem to listen to us. God, I've been praying for my mother for years and you don't seem to be listening. You see, I think the second problem in our prayer meetings is that we tell God facts that he already knows instead of telling him how we feel about things. He wants to hear about our feelings. Now, I know he knows our feelings as well as the facts. But feelings are important because feelings are about relationship. I can tell you that I'm in my 70s. I can tell you the date of my wedding. I can tell you I have an Audi car. I can tell you I have 8 grandchildren. But if I want to share my feelings with you, if I want to build a relationship with you, I need to tell you what it feels like to be in my 70s, what it feels like to have been married to one lady for so long. I need to tell you about my passion for driving and my love for my car and my desire to be in it. And I need to tell you about how worried I am about my grandchildren's behaviour. We need to express our feelings because feelings are about relationship. And prayer is a matter of relationship. God wants to know how we feel about things. And then in the next section, in verse 10 to 15, it's about remembrance in prayer. Then I thought, to this I will appeal, the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I'll remember your miracles of long ago. I will meditate on all your works and consider all your mighty deeds. Your ways, O God, are holy. What God is so great as our God? You are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples. With your mighty arm you redeem your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. Now, verse 10 is very, very interesting, isn't it? It says, then I thought, to this I will appeal the years of the right hand of the Most High. Now, why the right hand? Well, the right hand is the hand of action. In biblical culture, your left hand is your service hand, your backhand, your dirty hand. Your right hand is your hand of action. Now, some of you will know the great story in Exodus 3 of Ehud. Now, Ehud was a left-handed man. In fact, he was the patron saint of all left-handed and disabled people, because in those days, being left-handed was regarded as being disabled. And the story of Ehud shows how God can use left-handed and disabled people. It's a great story. So the psalmist says here, I will appeal to the years of the right hand of the Most High. That's powerful, isn't it? So he's going to appeal to the years of the effective action of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord, verse 11. I will meditate on your works, verse 12. I will consider all your mighty deeds, verse 12. Then in the next verses, in verse 13 to 15, we're told some of the things that this prayer remembers and muses upon and considers, and you'll have to read those again for yourself because time is short. But we do need to muse on remembering what God has done. And then in verses 16 to 20, we think about perspective in prayer. Above everything, our prayer must enable us to get things in perspective. Prayer is about perspective. The waters saw you, O God. The waters saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. The skies resounded with thunder. Your arrows flashed back and forth. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world. The earth trembled and quaked. Your path led through the sea. Your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. Now, we often say prayer changes things, don't we? Yes, it does. But actually, it's more significant to say prayer changes people. Prayer changes people. In the first 12 verses of this psalm, I or my occur 22 times. That's almost twice for every verse. And the last 8 verses of this psalm, I and my, don't occur at all. The fourth problem in our prayer is that we don't get things in perspective. We forget the big picture. Now, God has told us the skeleton of the big picture. Lots of things we don't know, but the things that we are told, we tend to forget. And our lives get dominated by our own situation, by the small picture. Now, God is interested in the small things and the details of our lives, but within the context of the big picture, which we so often forget. We need our horizons broadened. So when we say God changes people, what we really mean is that prayer helps us to look at the circumstances from God's vantage point, from his position, through his eyes, in God's perspective. So finally, as we sum up, if prayer is going to transform our lives, if prayer is going to transform our church, if prayer is going to change the world, we need to follow the pattern of here in Psalm 77 and muse more in prayer. We need to muse as we search God and God's will in prayer, as we are open and honest in prayer, as we remember things in prayer, as we try and get prayer in perspective. Will you go back to Psalm 77 again? I hope you will. And think about your prayer life and our corporate prayer life as a church. See, prayer is one of the things that we most easily get stuck in a rut with. We get into a habit, we get into a way of doing things, we get into a pattern. And our prayer can become very selfish, centered on me. We need to ask God to expand our vision, our horizons, and our experience. Do let me know if this psalm tells you anything else about prayer. And this psalm ends with verse 20. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. So there we are, back again in the book of Exodus. Thank you.